I want to introduce our first speaker. He has, for me, one of the most exciting titles that I've actually had the pleasure to introduce. He is Oliver Kenton, and just look at that title, Director of Creative and Experience, EY Digital. And as we know, EY is Ernst Young. Now that's some introduction for someone who's going to be talking about the incredible changes with regards to technology that are going to be taking place within our industry. So without any further ado, can I welcome Oliver to the stage? Can you give a big hand to Oliver? Thank you, Oliver.
Thanks, everybody. I don't know if you can hear me. Thanks for that, and thanks for that extraordinary introduction. I hope I can live up to it. As you see, I've got my title there. I've got a little Twitter tag for those of you that are going to that kind of stuff. And obviously, despite my title, we're required not to smile as part of our day-to-day work. Anyway, today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about tech. Obviously, technology is the reason that we're here to have a discussion, but the particular focus that I have in my team at Ernst & Young is customer experience. And I've been there for about 6 months, 9 months. I started in January. I head up the creative design, user experience, user research, user insight, functionality, capability that we have within our digital team. Previous to that, I was 5 years at EMC Consulting, where for our digital group there, I held a similar position. And so the orientation I wanted to take you through today was some of the trends that are impacting the way people use technology, the way they engage with businesses, both in retail and finance, and talk a little bit about our process when it actually comes to designing rich features, functionality, solutions, and capabilities for our clients. So I'm going to start off. There's a giant statistic. You can tell it's important. I've made it big. So it's 87% of the age group. This is a poll from last year. 87% of users between 25 and 35 would rather do all of their business online than actually use any real-world customer channel. Now, that isn't to sort of say that people are becoming hugely antisocial, but it's about the efficiencies and simplicities and personalization that can be brought to people's lives when they're engaging in large financial transactions through using these kinds of technologies. And importantly, not only do they use those for making those decisions, but 67, although a smaller number, they use 2 or more resources for researching their key financial decisions online. Obviously, Google will be one, that's straight in for everybody, but they often use other kinds of resources and tools and technology available to them. Everybody has a network of trusted advisors in their lives, often starts close to home. Some people have a broader spectrum, but the fact is people are using the tools and functionality available today to make significant changes and significant decisions in their lives. So that gives you some indication of where things are heading. Specifically, some of the areas around that we're seeing and that we've been seeing over the last couple of years that's been driving change in the digital marketplace is around what we've called digital basics. It's about multi-channel. It's about understanding that behavior change is upon us, and that's not just through technology, but people actually just interacting with businesses in a very different way. It's about creating loyalty, brand, and responsibility. I'm going to talk to you about some of these things now. So, digital basics. We are in a situation where everybody's trying to kind of engage directly with the customer through their web services, through their mobile applications, through their tablet services, and through their contact centers. And some of these areas are essentially an expected standard. If you're not kind of meeting these areas in the way that you do business and you engage with your customers, then actually you're going to turn people away. We're talking about things like going paperless, why make people go through arduous paperwork, actually taking their own paperwork and having to take it in and deliver it to somebody. It's about visualization, providing rich representations of their own financial data or their own personal choices. It's about integrating services that are available to people out there that they're using every day. Social sign-on, everybody, well not everybody, but a huge country-sized volume of people across the globe use Facebook. That provides a real simplicity in terms of creating profiles rather than people having to sign up again and again for different kinds of services. There's an expectation that the way in which they use their different products, whether they're on their phone, whether they are at home or in the office, it should act and respond the same way. So by default, there's an expectation that rather than delivering, say, tiny little websites on your mobile phone, that actually it's designed and optimized and built responsively, so that actually when you clock things up on your way home, you're getting the kind of information and the kind of interactivity that you'd expect. We're moving into very rich territory in terms of multi-channel. Lots of people are doing multiple channels in terms of contact centers, branch, human-oriented engagement, but actually some of the core players that are having real success is in creating an environment where they're meeting the challenges of users by orchestrating a system of functionality and rich content that works from device to device, whether you're sitting at home and doing a second screen viewing, whether you're using nested technology or mobile phones. There's an expectation that if I start in one channel on my phone and I ring you up, that I would expect you to know what it is that I've been doing. Behavior change is a real significant factor. All of these technologies, the way that people are using their mobile phones, the fact that the majority of people are now going to bed with their mobile phones for some strange reason. It's the last thing that they look at night, quite often the first thing they look at in the morning. It's not necessarily the healthiest of behaviors, but everybody's indulging in it. We've got Apple Watch has been launched this year with contactless payment. That's already having effects on the industry in terms of the way people buy stuff and the simplicity. And then you have to ask yourself, what's in people's minds the facilitator for people being able to make these transactions? Is it their bank who've supplied the function, who's supplied the actual financial part of it, or is it Apple who's actually made this whole process so easy? You've got Oculus technology. Facebook in the last 12 months bought that company for $2 billion. So that gives you a sort of sense of the kind of investment and the type of engagement they anticipate will be coming down the road. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Oculus, but essentially that's a 3D immersive technology. Some of you may remember that they used to exist in shopping centres for fun. About 20 years ago, there were these giant headsets and they gave you a headache. But now the technology has been really improved, and for anyone that hasn't used it, it's actually quite impressive and disorientating and strange, but deeply affecting and engaging. Loyalty is a big thing. Digital technology brings the opportunity to speak directly to customers, but not only to speak directly to them, but to have them speak directly back to you, to actually engage in a relationship. Businesses are moving away from the notion of we broadcast to you, we tell you what you can have, the way it's going to be, to customers actually demanding and expecting that they can form a real relationship on their own terms. And if you manage that correctly, you'll be paid back for it. Allow people to have a voice into your business and respond to it accordingly. We're seeing all sorts of key players across the globe developing real content. Obviously Netflix and Amazon have started to develop their own rich TV content, and that's high profile and everybody loves that kind of stuff. But what we're sort of seeing in terms of banks and financial institutions is the way that they're moving towards or rather moving beyond the transaction. Traditionally, people would come to banks, to lenders, even to intermediaries and kind of go, I need some finance. But that's actually not why they're there. There is a financial product that they need or a financial service. But how do you create a longer term relationship? You don't want people to basically come, borrow a big pot of money off you and then never see you again for 10 years. And actually, the banks have quite relied on that for a lot of their process, for a lot of their business process and business as usual, but because of the effects of the last 5 years in terms of the banking industry and harking back to the behaviour change aspect, we're finding that what they want to do is re-establish their place in the community. You're seeing aspects stuff like this, the way Barclays, for example, is responding with their digital e-goods program. Some people are quite cynical about it. For some people, it's actually quite helpful and useful, and they're trying to find a way to re-engage and play a role as perhaps banks once did in smaller communities. We're also seeing brands taking responsibility, taking social responsibility. Obviously, there's people like Jamie Oliver. He has a very large profile, and he's very active and vocal in terms of what he wants to do to affect change for the better in our society and for the children in school and essentially healthy eating. But many of the brands are cottoning onto this, and when you couple this with developing rich content and actually developing loyalty and relationship, you have an opportunity for banks and financial institutions in particular to play a real role in speaking to customers in terms of things that they care about. So that was just a brief run-through of those things. It's turning into a kind of different dynamic. Used to be the businesses that would direct things. Now customers are suggesting what it is that they want to do, and they want to engage on their own terms. And it's turning into a kind of push-me, pull-you scenario. Who's driving? Well, both people are driving. And actually, what you want is a partnership that people can move forward together. Is it about delivering all of this stuff all in one hit? It isn't. It's actually quite challenging for many large businesses to organise themselves appropriately, to become digitally enabled internally, and to deliver this kind of experience to their customers. But it's about delivering the right experience at the right time, whether people are using their mobiles on their way home from work, or whether they're using their desktops at lunchtime, or whether they're sitting in a branch having a conversation. You want to be able to deliver these kinds of products and services in an appropriate way for them. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what that means for the customer and where they are, and how we actually design for some of that process. So we've come to a place where many of the interactions that people have with their banks, for example, they've all got mobile apps. It's limited. It's snack based. It's like they're checking in, they're checking their statement. Have they been paid? Has a bill been paid? They come and go, but there's no real opportunity necessarily to extend that relationship. When it comes to buying a home, when it comes to taking out a mortgage, that's a process that typically takes 2-3 months at the earliest. Sometimes it can go on much longer. And the bank has a role to play in that, traditionally lending the money and enabling that situation, but it actually goes further than that. And some of the work that we're doing with our clients here in the UK, some of the high street banks, the way that they're trying to reposition themselves is to understand that they are there to offer a service more than simply providing the cash. They're trying to accommodate the changes that I've alluded to. Today, in many instances, they have separate, unconnected channels. Yes, they have online. They have an on-phones, a contact center phone service that you can phone up. But typically, what you've done online and the interaction that you have on the phone is very different. Typically, you're starting those conversations all over again. You might go into an intermediary and begin there. I think many of you are intermediaries, is that the case? But so you'll be very used to that. And then there's the question of if they want to re-engage come remortgage time, how does the customer do that? Do they come back to you? Do they go back straight to their lender? Where is the relationship held? And obviously you have branch. We're attempting to help out the businesses that we work with on a daily basis move from multiple channels of separate, discrete functionality and customer experience into multi-channel, and ultimately from multi-channel into a single orchestrated ecosystem of experience, so that essentially they feel that at any point that they want to deal with you on their own terms, you know who they are, you're responding to their needs, you've understood what they've been through in terms of, say, a detailed mortgage application or some other financial advice, and you can pick up on that, whether they're calling you in a panic at 3 o'clock in the morning or they're walking into a branch at lunchtime. So what does that mean in terms of buying a house? Often when we engage in the projects that my team work with the clients that we have, we try to steer the business away from their immediate business problem, which isn't to say that we don't want to address it, but large companies have large problems, small companies the same, about basically their focus is we want to deliver and sell mortgages, for example. That's fine, that's their core business. But we need to try and help them orient themselves differently around customers, because as I've alluded to, customer experience and expectations is changing. For the customer in the street, apart from a minority of buy-to-let and business-orientated people, buying a house is actually more about home than it is to do with the financial transaction. The world they exist in is one of aspiration and dreaming. Maybe it's their first home, maybe they're moving and upscaling for their families. They're dealing with Rightmove that's providing all the information right there that they need. They're going into John Lewis and thinking about how they might do things up. They're checking their own finances and the finances of the area they're moving to on Zoopla and looking at house prices. So for them, it's not about a transaction, it's about buying a home. It's about standing there in soft focus with your milkless tea. Because ultimately it's about a dream that they have, an aspiration, a desire to move on and make important, real decisions that will affect them personally and perhaps those of their family. It's not about arranging a mortgage. Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, I really got to get myself one of those. They do it for a specific reason. And so my team will kind of go in, help the business to try to focus around the customer's particular needs and goals. And so the question is, how do we bridge that gap from what the bank wants to do on a kind of on paper to what the customer wants to achieve? We have various tools and resources that we do to try and help elicit insight and user data that will help inform the design decisions we make. We typically go into a business and ask not just them but their customers meaningful questions. Not just, do you want a mortgage, how would you like it? But actually, who do you want to be? Who are your customers? What are their needs and goals and ambitions? What is your mission as a business overall? Which channels do you want to serve? We actually go out and talk directly to customers, and it's quite surprising how often when we go to large businesses, the people that we're dealing with, sometimes large project-oriented teams from a national bank or small bespoke people within the institution, actually haven't spoken to customers in some instances for years, and in some cases they've never spoken to customers. But then nonetheless they're there making important decisions on their behalf. So what we often do, as quickly and early as possible, is get the customers in the room. Whether we do that through a research lab, whether we go out and do it through extensive interviews, we want their feedback, we want their insight, we want to understand what's driving their focus and their needs and their goals. We want to understand who they are to this organisation. They have different needs depending on who they are, whether they're remortgaging or first-time buyers, whether they are buy-to-let, whether they're colleagues in branch, whether they're underwriters or back-office staff, whether they're intermediaries like some of you. We go and try and account for all of the different needs. All of you are focused on the same goal. You want to come in, arrange finance, make sure the customer has what they want. The customer wants the same things, but how you do it is very different. And a large bank doesn't want to invest in multiple platforms, one to service the lenders, the brokers and intermediaries, one for the customer, one for the mobile. We want a single platform that services and scales and flexes for people in different ways. So what we'll do is we'll take that information, we'll take that core customer information, and we'll create personas. Some of you may be familiar with personas as an artifact, as a design resource. It's very similar to customer segmentation that businesses will have typically, but rather than being driven by demographics or social orientation, it's actually about how they behave. It's about customer behavior, it's about user needs, it's about goals, and about their workflow and what it is that they need to get out of a particular thing. At the end of the day, this is still just people trying to achieve a specific goal, and we need to understand what that is and how we can do it more efficiently. As a business, we need to understand who you are to them. What do you represent to your internal staff? What do you represent to the customers out there? You may have a brand and an ambition that you want to get across, but how do people really see you? Are you a financial partner? Not often. A lender, certainly. An investor, possibly. Are you a roadblock? Are you just simply some administration? We'll then take this a bit further. We'll explore your brand with you, or explore the business's brand. We'll CSI it, which is obviously for those of you who like kind of gory crime dramas, is a way of kind of deconstructing and pulling apart and trying to understand that, okay, you're out there saying that you're about personality or simplicity or being expert or super helpful, but actually are you making an impact, or are you leaving some damage behind you? And we try to explore what that means in terms of rich interfaces and functionality. We'll compare you against the landscape, not just in terms of other financial institutions, but as I was alluding to before, when your customers are out there thinking about the kind of tools and products and services that they use with the retail sector, they want the same kind of experience. So if you're out there sort of saying, we're the super helpful brand, we're going to make sure that we explain everything really simply, and you can rely on us to be the most trusted advisor you've got. Well, they've got people like John Lewis. Everybody loves John Lewis. You always know you can find somebody who's super helpful. If you're pitching against them, you better meet those expectations the customer has when they're going in. We'll go in, we'll take this information, we'll explore design patterns, we'll explore functionality and best practices in the industry. We're trying to understand that when you put yourself out there as kind of, I want a super sharp expert tool to help me make decisions or facilitate a discussion with my customers, who else is doing that kind of material really well? Not to mimic it, not to copy it, but to understand that if this is what your customers are using, then you need to be doing it too. We'll develop these into core user journeys. For each of those people that I outlined earlier, they each have a different process, a different way of arriving at your business, and a different way of engaging in a different workflow. Some of them will be single channel, some of them may want to move from channel to channel. And as we do this, and we start to outline sketches and ideas about what that experience might be like, we'll actually go out and test this. We met the customers at the beginning. Our goal is to kind of keep bringing the customer back into the room. Remember who they are. The personas are there as a kind of emblem, as something to keep the focus as we go through our design choices, but it's important to get the people back in the room and understand how they'll work with it. And ultimately, what we're trying to achieve here is an understanding. We call this an experience architecture. It's quite an ambitious name, but for many institutions, for many businesses, small and large, their notion is that the customer's desire to work with them only begins at the moment they walk in the door. But actually, a customer's journey is much longer, sometimes starting many weeks and months prior to them arriving at your front door. When they first sit there and go, let's move in together, or let's buy our first house, or let's move, or let's refinance so we can build that third bedroom so the kids don't have to share anymore. These are important decisions, and we will go in, we'll speak to customers, we'll speak to people in the business, we'll try to understand what is the process that brings people to your front door, and then once they get to your front door, what do you put them through? What kind of machine do you put them through? Is it easy? Is it straightforward? Is it tons of paperwork? Is it painful? Is it working well today? And what we want to do is try and use those to bring up challenges and opportunities and help you and our customers as a business to transform the way they engage with their customers directly. And allows us to kind of go in and take a view. So it allows us to set a direction for the business. I'm just going to whiz you through here something that was kind of there to kind of articulate some of the things we've talked about. So you have your customers, and they go on a particular journey. We've got Bill and Linda. They're interested in finding a new home. Naturally, the first place they go to is Rightmove. That begins their journey after they've spoken to people. But sooner or later, they're going to want to speak to somebody who can help them financially. Now, Rightmove is making great strides in that direction and bringing that kind of functionality directly into their interface. So you can find out, they've got tools and calculators, you can do it right there. But these people still want to engage with a business that they trust. They might go out to their own banks, they might go out to third parties, they'll have already done a search on Google, they'll have used some of the tools that I know my colleague in Mortgage Brain is going to talk to you about today. It's available to you out there to help your decision making. So you better be providing that. But not just that. People, as we say, still want to talk to an advisor. Maybe they come into your office, maybe they speak to the bank on the other end. Either way, they orient themselves around the problem that they have, which is how can they achieve their goal, which is getting a home. And how can you facilitate that with providing the right finances in a way that's meaningful and understandable to them so they can make informed choices. That allows them to go back out with their affordability. We need to provide them with constant understanding of what that journey might be like. We need the banks and the financial institutions to play a role in keeping the customer informed rather than what often happens, which is that you go in, you fill out a bunch of forms, you fill out your information, you don't hear anything, maybe it takes a few days, things go awry, it's all a bit kind of mixed up. There's the ability today to kind of have people sign up, create a profile, and be informed as it goes. You can create and build a relationship out of that. You can then go in and provide tools directly into their mortgage profile. It's no longer just like, here's your sum of money, or we'll let you know. People can go in and go, well, I've applied for this. Maybe they've got an approval in principle. Maybe they can go into an interface and engage and sort of see some understanding of how it is that the kind of sum of money that they borrowed, how much they're going to be paying back in interest. And if they don't like that, and if they haven't yet moved on to the actual signing of this, we should provide the facility for people to be able to go in, manipulate those figures, sort of say get to an ideal sum, so they can be right for them and allow them to move forward with their own ambitions. Ultimately, what we're looking to do is to create a meaningful experience. We're trying to create something, an architecture, a set of tools, a set of visual identity that's meaningful for the bank, but more importantly, meaningful for the customers. And by customers, I mean everybody in that food chain who has to use the facilities of this bank or financial institution in a way that speaks to them, allows them to do their job more easily, more effectively, to communicate better with their customers directly, or allow individuals to go out and make informed choices. And ultimately, we're looking to develop an experience that's joined up, that's coherent and meaningful for everybody, and uplifts the business for the banks and the financial institutions, and makes an impact on people's lives. Thank you.